0330 hours, September 10th, 2000. Ochre Hills, Sierra Leone. 72 men sit in 3 Chinook helicopters. Rotors turning. No lights. The air temperature is 31 degrees Celsius. Humidity at 93%. The jungle below is absolute black. In exactly 90 seconds, these men will fly into a compound defended by an estimated 400 drugged, heavily armed militia fighters. They will do this deliberately. They will do this knowing that 11 British soldiers are chained inside that compound. And they will do this knowing that the militia's leader has promised, on a captured radio frequency monitored by GCHQ, to execute every single hostage at dawn. Dawn is 2 hours and 27 minutes away. The mission commander, a D Squadron officer whose name remains classified to this day, keys his radio. One word: door knocker. The Chinooks lift. The clock starts. This is Operation Barras, the 6-hour mission that destroyed the most dangerous militia in West Africa, rescued 11 hostages without losing a single, won, and effectively ended a war that had killed over 50,000 people. When senior officers at Permanent Joint Headquarters in Northwood first saw the operational plan, one brigadier reportedly asked the question that would later become the unofficial title of every after-action briefing: who approved this suicide mission? The answer was Downing Street. The answer was Tony Blair himself. And the answer nearly cost Britain more soldiers in a single morning than the entire Kosovo campaign. But it didn't, because the men on those helicopters were not ordinary soldiers. They were not even ordinary special forces. They were D Squadron, 22nd Special Air Service Regiment, and they had spent 11 days watching, waiting, and memorizing every square meter of that jungle compound through thermal imaging, so precise they could count the number of weapons stacked inside each building. This is the story of how they did it. Minute by minute, decision by decision, round by round. To understand what happened at 0330 on that September morning, you have to understand what Sierra Leone looked like in the summer of 2000. And it looked like the end of the world. The civil war had been burning for 9 years. It started in 1991 when a former army corporal named Foday Sanko launched the Revolutionary United Front from the Liberian border with fewer than 300 fighters. By 2000, the conflict had produced an estimated 2 million refugees, 75,000 dead, and a campaign of systematic amputation, hands, arms, lips, ears, that remains one of the most documented atrocities of the late 20th century. The rough signature tactic was to enter a village and ask civilians a single question: long sleeves or short sleeves? Long sleeves meant amputation at the wrist. Short sleeves meant amputation at the elbow. Britain had deployed forces to Sierra Leone in May 2000 under Operation Barras. The initial mandate was limited: evacuate British nationals and stabilize the capital, Freetown. The deployment was built around the 1st Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, with additional Royal Marines, Royal Navy assets, and a small SAS advisory team attached to coordinate with the Sierra Leone Army. Within weeks, the Paras had secured Lungi Airport, established a perimeter around Freetown, and begun pushing the RUF back from the capital's outskirts. It was textbook intervention: fast, professional, proportionate. But it wasn't the RUF that created the crisis. It was a splinter group that nobody outside West African intelligence circles had heard of. A group so volatile, so unpredictable, and so saturated with drugs and stolen military hardware that even the RUF wanted nothing to do with them. They called themselves the West Side Boys. The name sounds almost comical. It wasn't. The West Side Boys were a rogue militia of between 300 and 500 former Sierra Leone army soldiers who had deserted during the Civil War, allied briefly with the RUF, then broken away to establish their own territory along the Ochre Hills near the village of Gaberi Bana on the Rokal Creek. Their leader was a 24-year-old self-proclaimed brigadier named Foday Calais. He was, by multiple intelligence assessments, later declassified by the Ministry of Defense, clinically psychotic. He consumed vast quantities of cocaine and palm wine daily. He ordered executions for entertainment. He kept a personal harem of kidnapped women, some as young as 13. His fighters, many of them child soldiers, were kept in a perpetual state of intoxication, using a cocktail of marijuana, amphetamines, and locally brewed alcohol. They controlled a stretch of road that ran between Freetown and the provincial town of Masiaka, and they taxed, robbed, raped, and murdered anyone who used it. On August 25, 2000, 11 soldiers from the 1st Battalion, the Royal Irish Regiment, drove into West Side Boys territory. This was not an accident, but it was a catastrophic misjudgment. The patrol, led by a major and accompanied by a Sierra Leone Army liaison officer, was conducting a routine reconnaissance along the Masiaka Road. They had been warned that the area was dangerous. They had been told that the West Side Boys were unpredictable. But the patrol commander made a decision that would later be examined in excruciating detail at every level of the British chain of command. He accepted an invitation from West Side Boys fighters to enter their compound for discussions. Within 30 minutes, all 11 soldiers were disarmed and held hostage. Their Land Rovers were seized. Their weapons, including SA-80 rifles, a light support weapon, and personal radios, were taken. The Sierra Leone Army liaison officer was separated from the group and beaten severely. The news hit permanent joint headquarters at Northwood like a bomb. 11 British soldiers taken hostage in a country where Britain was supposed to be the stabilizing force. The political implications were enormous. The military implications were worse, because the West Side Boys now had British weapons, British radios, and, most dangerously, British hostages they could use as human shields. The first 72 hours were consumed by negotiation. A team from the Defense Crisis Management Organization worked alongside the Sierra Leone government to establish dialogue with Fode Calais. It partially worked. On August 28th, after 3 days of tense exchanges, Calais released 5 of the 11 hostages in exchange for a satellite phone and medical supplies. The released soldiers were debriefed immediately. What they described was alarming. The remaining 6 hostages were being held in a single building in the center of Bana. They were handcuffed. They were being fed once a day. Several had been beaten. Calais was becoming increasingly erratic, oscillating between grandiose demands. He wanted a formal meeting with the British ambassador, a government position, and university scholarships for his fighters, and violent paranoia. He had executed 2 of his own men during the hostage period for perceived disloyalty. Intelligence officers assessed that the situation was deteriorating rapidly and that the hostages' lives were in immediate and growing danger. On September 1st, the Director of Special Forces authorized the deployment of D Squadron, 22nd SAS, to Sierra Leone. They landed at Lungi Airport within 48 hours, and for the next 11 days, they did what the SAS does better than almost any special operations unit on the planet. They watched. D Squadron established 4 covert observation posts around the West Side Boys compound at Bana. Each post was manned by a 4-man patrol operating in complete concealment between 100 and 300 meters from the compound perimeter. They maintained continuous surveillance for 264 hours, 24 hours a day. 11 consecutive days, in jungle terrain where the temperature exceeded 35 degrees during the day and the humidity never dropped below 85%, where mosquitoes carried cerebral malaria, where the undergrowth was so dense that movement of more than a few meters required cutting with a machete, which they could not use because the noise would compromise their position. The intelligence they gathered was extraordinary. Through a combination of direct observation, thermal imaging equipment, and signals intelligence provided by GCHQ, the SAS teams mapped every building in the compound. They identified the hostage location. They plotted the positions of heavy weapons, including a 14.5mm DSHK heavy machine gun, at least 3 general-purpose machine guns, multiple RPG-7 launchers, and an estimated 600 individual small arms. They catalogued the daily routine: when the fighters slept, when they ate, when they were most intoxicated, when the guard shifts changed. They identified Fode Calais' personal quarters. They tracked his movements hour by hour, and they reached a conclusion that shaped the entire operation. The West Side Boys were most vulnerable between 0300 and 0500 hours. This was the window when the highest number of fighters were unconscious from the previous night's drinking and drug use. Guard posts were either unmanned or manned by fighters who were themselves heavily impaired. The heavy weapons positions were typically abandoned during this period. The operational plan that emerged was audacious. It was also the only plan that gave the hostages a realistic chance of survival, and it terrified the planners at Northwood. The plan called for a simultaneous two-pronged assault. D Squadron, approximately 60 operators, would assault the main compound at Barras where the hostages were held. This was the primary objective, codenamed Operation Barras. Simultaneously, the 1st Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, approximately 150 soldiers from A Company, would assault a 2nd West Side Boys position across the Rokel Creek at the village of Magbeni. This secondary assault served a dual purpose. It would destroy the West Side Boys' reserve force and heavy weapons capability at Magbeni, and it would prevent reinforcements from crossing the creek to support the defense of Barras. The two assaults would be launched simultaneously. At H hour, 3 Chinook HC-2 helicopters would deliver the assault forces. 2 Westland Lynx attack helicopters from the Army Air Corps would provide close air support. A single Mi-24 Hind helicopter, operated by a contracted crew supporting the Sierra Leone government, would provide additional firepower. 2 inflatable Zodiac boats, manned by SBS operators, would secure the Rokel Creek crossing point between the two villages. The margin for error was essentially zero. If the West Side Boys heard the helicopters approaching and reached their hostages before D Squadron reached the building, the 6 British soldiers would die. If the Magbeni force wasn't suppressed quickly enough, 300 to 400 additional fighters could cross the creek and overwhelm the SAS assault team. If Fode Calais triggered a pre-planned execution order, which intelligence suggested he had communicated to his guards, the mission would become a recovery operation, not a rescue. The commanding officer of the Parachute Regiment Battle Group, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Gibson, was briefed on the plan in its entirety. His assessment, delivered to Brigadier Gordon Hughes at Freetown, was characteristically blunt. It's workable, but the margins are thin, and the casualty estimate is not pretty. The casualty estimate, according to multiple sources who were present at the planning sessions, projected between 5 and 15 British dead. For a military establishment that had lost 0 soldiers in combat during the entire Kosovo campaign the previous year, this was a staggering figure. It meant that a single morning in the Sierra Leone jungle could produce more British combat deaths than any engagement since the Falklands. Brigadier Hughes forwarded the plan to Northwood. Northwood forwarded it to the Chief of the Defence Staff, General Sir Charles Guthrie. Guthrie forwarded it to the Prime Minister's office. The approval chain took less than 12 hours. Tony Blair authorised Operation Barras on September 9, 2000. H hour was set for 0630 the following morning, adjusted from the original 0300 window to allow for first light, which the helicopter pilots needed for the approach through jungle canopy. The adjustment was a compromise. First light gave the pilots the visibility they needed, but it also meant the West Side Boys would be stirring. The intoxication window was closing. Every minute past 0500 increased the probability that fighters would be awake and armed. D Squadron accepted the revised timing without complaint. They had 11 days of pattern of life intelligence. They knew exactly what they were flying into, and they had rehearsed the assault 7 times on a full-scale mock-up of the Barras compound, built at their forward operating base near Lungi Airport, using timber, canvas, and aerial photographs to replicate every building, every doorway, every firing position. 0300 hours. September 10th. The D Squadron operators begin final preparations at the forward operating base. Weapons are checked for the last time. Every man carries a Democo C8 carbine, the Canadian manufactured variant of the M16 favored by the SAS for close-quarter battle, with a minimum of 12 30-round magazines. That's 360 rounds per operator. Sidearms are Sig Sauer P226 pistols with 3 additional magazines, flashbang grenades, fragmentation grenades, personal medical kits including tourniquets, morphine auto-injectors, and chest seals. The assault team leaders conduct final briefings. Each four-man team knows its precise route from the helicopter landing zone to its designated building. The distances have been measured from aerial photography, 47 meters from the primary LZ to the hostage building, 63 meters to Fode Calais' quarters, 31 meters to the heavy weapons position on the compound's northern edge. 0415. The three Chinooks begin engine start procedures. The noise is enormous in the pre-dawn silence. Every man knows that from this moment, the operation is committed. There is no recall. The hostages' guards will hear the helicopters at approximately 3 minutes out. 3 minutes. That is the window between detection and arrival. 180 seconds for the West Side boys to decide whether to fight, run, or execute their prisoners. 0445. The assault force boards the Chinooks, D Squadron, in the first two aircraft, Icony, a company, 1 para, in the third. The SBS team launches the Zodiac boats from a concealed position 1 kilometer upstream on the Rokal Creek. Their job is to reach the crossing point between Gaberi Bana and Magbeni before H-hour and ensure that no fighters cross in either direction. 0530. The Chinooks lift off from Lungi. Flight time to target, approximately 40 minutes. The helicopters fly low, between 50 and 100 feet above the jungle canopy, to minimize radar detection and reduce the audio signature for as long as possible. Inside the aircraft, the noise makes conversation impossible. The operators sit in silence, running through their individual actions on target. 0612, 18 minutes to H-hour. The Chinook pilots receive a final intelligence update via secure radio from the observation posts still in position around Gaberi Bana. The update is critical. The hostages are confirmed in the same building. Fode Calais is in his quarters. The DSHK heavy machine gun position is unmanned. 3 guard posts are active with an estimated 2 fighters at each. The remaining force, between 200 and 300 fighters, are in their buildings. Many are assessed to still be sleeping or impaired. 0620, 10 minutes. The Lynx attack helicopters, which have been holding in a racetrack pattern 8 kilometers south, accelerate toward the target area. Their job is to arrive 30 seconds before the Chinooks and suppress any heavy weapons positions that have become active. Each Lynx carries a 20mm cannon and TO double anti-tank missiles, though the missiles are a last resort given the proximity of the hostages. 06205. 5 minutes. The lead Chinook pilot can see the Rokal Creek through his night vision goggles. The river gleams in the pre-dawn light. Beyond it, the tree canopy over Gaberi Bana is a solid dark mass. Somewhere in that darkness, 6 British soldiers have been chained to the same position for 16 days. In the back of the helicopter, the D Squadron team leader stands. He holds up 5 fingers. Every operator checks his weapon one final time. Safety's off. Magazines seated. Chambers loaded. 0628. 2 minutes. The first Lynx arrives over Gaberi Bana. The pilot identifies the DSHK position, still unmanned, and 2 active guard posts. He holds fire. The element of surprise is worth more than early suppression. Every second the West Side boys don't know what's coming is a second the hostages stay alive. 0629, 1 minute. The Chinook pilots begin their deceleration. The aircraft nose pitches up. The rotor wash hits the jungle canopy and tears through leaves and branches with a sound like continuous thunder. This is the moment. From here, everything happens at combat speed. At the Magbeni compound across the creek, the first sounds of helicopter rotors reach the West Side boys' fighters. Several stumble from their buildings, disoriented, still intoxicated. One reaches an RPG launcher propped against a wall. He doesn't get to fire it. 0630. H-hour. The lead Chinook flares over the primary landing zone at Gaberi Bana, a clearing approximately 60 meters south of the hostage building. The rear ramp drops while the aircraft is still 3 feet above the ground. D Squadron operators pour out at a full sprint. The first boots hit Sierra Leone dirt at exactly 0630 and 14 seconds. 14 seconds. That is how long it takes from the ramp dropping to the first operator clearing the aircraft. 12 men. 14 seconds. each man carrying approximately 28 kilograms of weapons, ammunition, and equipment, moving at a dead run toward a compound containing up to 300 armed fighters. Simultaneously, the 3rd Chinook delivers A Company, 1 para, to a landing zone 400 meters south of Magbeni. The paras hit the ground in a textbook air assault formation and begin advancing toward the village in 2 platoon strength groups. 06:30 and 45 seconds. The first shots are fired. A West Side Boys sentry at the northeastern guard post spots the SAS operators moving through the scrubland toward the compound and opens fire with an AK-47. He fires 17 rounds. Every single one misses. The distance is approximately 80 meters. He is shooting at moving targets in poor light, while almost certainly under the influence of whatever he consumed the previous night. The SAS response is instantaneous. 2 operators engage the sentry from 35 meters. 4 rounds. The sentry is down. But the gunfire has done its job, not for the West Side Boys, but against the assault force. The compound is now alert. Shouts erupt from multiple buildings. Figures appear in doorways. The characteristic sound of AK safety catches being disengaged ripples across the compound. Inside the hostage building, the 6 Royal Irish soldiers hear the shooting and understand immediately what is happening. One of them, according to a debriefing transcript later quoted by the BBC, shouts a single word to the others: "Floor." All 6 men throw themselves flat, taking their chairs and their handcuffs with them. 06:31 A. 60 seconds since H-hour. The hostage rescue team, 8 D squadron operators, reaches the building. The entry is violent, fast, and precisely rehearsed. 2 operators place frame charges on the single door. The charges detonate. The door ceases to exist. 2 flashbang grenades go through the breach point. The detonation inside the confined space produces a sound pressure of approximately 170 decibels and a flash of 7 million candela. Anyone standing inside who is not wearing ear protection and closing their eyes is temporarily blind and deaf. The 8 operators enter in pairs: 2 left, 2 right, 2 straight, 2 covering. The room contains the 6 hostages, on the floor, exactly where they should be, and 2 West Side Boys guards. The guards are standing. One is holding a weapon. Neither can see, neither can hear. Both are down in under 2 seconds. The hostage rescue team leader keys his radio. Door knocker. Package secure. 6. I repeat, 6. Alive. The time is 06:30, 1 and 40 seconds. 71 seconds since the first D Squadron boot hit the ground. 97 seconds since the ramp dropped. The 6 hostages are alive. But the operation is far from over. The rescue was the first objective. The second objective is the destruction of the West Side Boys as a fighting force. And at 06:32, the West Side Boys of Gaberi Banner begin to fight back. The response is chaotic, but intense. Fighters emerge from buildings across the compound. Many shirtless, many barefoot, but armed and firing. AK rounds crack overhead. RPG rockets, unguided, poorly aimed, streak across the compound, trailing white smoke. The DSHK heavy machine gun, abandoned minutes ago, is now manned. A fighter has reached the position and begins raking the southern approach with 14.5mm rounds that tear through vegetation and shatter tree trunks. The Lynx helicopters respond. The lead aircraft rolls in on the DSHK position and fires a sustained burst from its 20mm cannon. The heavy machine gun goes silent. The second Lynx engages a concentration of fighters attempting to form a defensive line along the compound's eastern edge. The 20mm rounds chew through the wooden and corrugated metal structures as if they were paper. On the ground, D Squadron operates with the precision that 11 days of surveillance has purchased. Each team knows where it is going. Each team knows what is in its building. The clearance is systematic, room by room, building by building, moving north through the compound toward Fode Calais' quarters. Resistance is heavy in places. Some fighters have barricaded themselves inside structures and are firing through windows and loopholes. But the SAS teams use a combination of fragmentation grenades, frame charges, and aggressive room entry to clear each position. 0645. 15 minutes since H hour. Across the Rokel Creek at Magbany, a company of 1 para is in a full-scale firefight. The West Side Boys at Magbany are more organized than intelligence predicted. An estimated 150 fighters have established defensive positions along the tree line on the northern edge of the village. They are pouring fire into the Paris' advance with a mix of AK rifles, RPK machine guns, and at least 2 RPG teams. The Paris respond with GPMGs, light mortars, and the extraordinary aggression that is the Parachute Regiment's institutional signature. Platoon commanders push their sections forward by fire and maneuver, one section suppressing while the next advances, then leapfrogging, then suppressing again. The distances are short. In some places, the jungle is so dense that contact happens at 20 meters or less. It is close-quarter infantry fighting at its most visceral. Private Brad Tinian, D Squadron, 22nd SAS, is hit during the clearance of a building in the central compound at Gaberi Bana. The round strikes him in the chest. Despite immediate treatment by the team medic, including a chest seal and intravenous fluids administered under fire, Tinian's wounds are catastrophic. He is evacuated by Chinook to the medical facility at Leone, but does not survive. He is 26 years old. Tinian is the only British fatality of Operation Barras. 12 other soldiers, SAS and Paris, are wounded during the operation, some seriously. The cost is real. It is not hidden. Every after-action report acknowledges it. But the cost to the West Side Boys is destruction. 0700. 30 minutes since H hour, the Gaberi Bala compound is largely secured. D Squadron has cleared the majority of buildings. Fode Calais has been found in his quarters. The details of his capture remain partially classified, but multiple sources confirm that he was taken alive, intoxicated, incoherent, and offering no meaningful resistance. He was carrying a Beretta pistol that he never fired. Beside his bed, the SAS found a handwritten execution order for the hostages, dated September 10th, scheduled for 0730. 30 minutes after it was written, the man who wrote it was in handcuffs. The execution order is the detail that silences every critic of the operation. It was real. It was dated. It was specific. The hostages had 30 minutes to live when D Squadron reached them. If the assault had been delayed by another hour, if the negotiators had been given one more day, if the political authority had wavered, 6 British soldiers would have been murdered. 0745. At Magbany, the Paris have broken through the West Side Boys' defensive line and are clearing the village building by building. The resistance is collapsing. Fighters are fleeing into the jungle. Some are surrendering. The Paris take 18 prisoners in the final phase of the clearance. The SBS team on the Rokel Creek intercepts 11 fighters attempting to cross by boat. None escape. 0800. 90 minutes since H hour. Both objectives are at Leone Airport receiving medical treatment. Fode Calais is in British custody. The West Side Boys' arsenal, captured intact, includes 1 DSHK heavy machine gun, 3 GPMGs, 33 RPG launchers, over 300 AK-type rifles, and approximately 50,000 rounds of mixed ammunition. The combined arms cache is larger than the entire stockpile of some legitimate national armies. 0930, 3 hours since H hour. The evacuation is complete. Every British soldier, alive and dead, has been extracted from the operational area. The forward operating base at Leone begins the after-action process. Radio intercepts monitored by GCHQ over the following 48 hours reveal the scale of the impact. West Side Boys commanders in other locations are ordering their fighters to disperse, abandon positions, and hide their weapons. The organization that terrorized the Ochre Hills region for years is disintegrating in real time. Within 72 hours, over 300 West Side Boys surrender to United Nations forces. Within a week, the group effectively ceases to exist. The war in Sierra Leone did not end on September 10, 2000. The formal disarmament process continued into 2002. UN peacekeepers remained in country until 2005. But every serious analysis of the conflict, including the United Nations' own post-conflict assessment, identifies Operation Barras as the decisive turning point. It was the moment when the most dangerous non-state armed group in the country was destroyed, when the pattern of hostage-taking and intimidation was broken, and when every remaining militia faction understood that Britain would use lethal force without hesitation to protect its personnel and its mission. Brigadier Gordon Hughes, who oversaw the operation from Freetown, told a Ministry of Defence review board the effect was disproportionate to the size of the action. A single morning changed the entire security calculus of the country. He was right. 22 SAS operators and approximately 150 paras, supported by 5 helicopters and a handful of special boat service operators in rubber boats, accomplished in 90 minutes what 9 years of civil war, multiple peace agreements, and 17,000 UN peacekeepers had failed to achieve. They didn't just rescue 6 soldiers. They destroyed an organization. They shattered a myth of militia invincibility. They demonstrated, not through words, through briefings, through diplomatic cables, but through a dawn assault on a jungle compound, that there is a level of professional military violence that no amount of drug-fueled fanaticism can withstand. The SAS does not publish casualty figures for operations. The Ministry of Defence has never confirmed the exact number of West Side boys killed during Operation Barras. Estimates from journalistic and academic sources range from 25 to over 150. The BBC, citing unnamed military sources, reported at least 25 dead. Other analyses, including those by the International Crisis Group, suggest the true figure was significantly higher, with many wounded fighters dying in the jungle in the days following the assault without medical treatment. What is confirmed is this: not a single hostage was killed. Not a single hostage was seriously injured. Every man who went in on those helicopters came back, except Brad Tinian, whose name is inscribed on the SAS memorial at the Regimental Church of St. Martin's in Hereford. The wider question, the one that hung over every planning session and every political decision, was whether the risk was justified. 15 projected dead. A single morning operation in a country most British citizens couldn't find on a map. For 6 hostages. The military answer is unambiguous. Do not leave your people. That is not a slogan. That is not a recruiting poster. It is a covenant. It means that every soldier in a British uniform, anywhere in the world, in any situation, knows that the full weight of the British military will come for them. It means that every potential hostage taker, every militia leader, every warlord considering whether to grab a British patrol, knows that the consequence will not be negotiation. It will not be sanctions. It will not be a strongly worded letter from the Foreign Office. It will be D Squadron at dawn. General Sir Charles Guthrie, Chief of the Defence Staff, who personally recommended the operation to the Prime Minister, addressed the question directly in a speech to the Royal United Services Institute 3 months later. His words were measured, precise, and unmistakable. There are moments when a nation must demonstrate that it possesses both the capability and the will to act. Sierra Leone was such a moment. The men who conducted Operation Barras did not merely rescue hostages. They sent a message that resonated across every theatre in which British forces operate. That message was simple. We will come. The 6 rescued soldiers of the Royal Irish Regiment returned to their families. Their names were withheld from public reporting at the time, and most have remained private. But the debriefing transcripts, portions of which were later obtained by journalists under Freedom of Information requests, contain a detail that captures the operation more completely than any tactical analysis. When the D Squadron operators entered the hostage building at 0631, the first words spoken by the lead operator to the 6 men on the floor were, "Lads, we're British Army. Let's go." No drama, no Hollywood moment, just 5 words and a direction of travel. One of the hostages, still handcuffed, still lying face down on a concrete floor he had occupied for 16 days, responded with 2 words that every soldier in the British Army understands as the highest possible compliment from one professional to another. He said, "About time." The handcuffs were cut with bolt croppers carried specifically for the purpose. The hostages were on their feet in under 20 seconds. They were at the helicopter landing zone in under 3 minutes. They were airborne in under 7. They were at Leone Airport in under 40. They were on a Royal Air Force C-17 Globemaster bound for RAF Bryce Norton in under 12 hours. 6 men, 16 days in captivity, rescued in 97 seconds. When the operational files were reviewed by the Directorate of Special Forces in the weeks following Barras, the analysis focused on what had made it work. The conclusion was not technology. It was not air power. It was not the Chinooks or the Lynx helicopters or the 20mm cannons, though all were essential. The conclusion was 11 days of patient, disciplined, physically brutal observation, post-work by 4-man SAS teams who lay motionless in jungle undergrowth for 264 hours, to build a picture so complete that the assault force knew the compound better than the men who lived in it. That is the SAS methodology. It isn't glamorous. It doesn't make good cinema. 11 days lying in your own filth, covered in insect bites, unable to move more than a few inches, defecating into plastic bags, drinking water purified through a filter straw, watching a target through a thermal imaging sight until your eyes ache. That is not what the recruitment posters show, but it is what makes everything else possible. Without those 11 days, the assault force is flying into a building it has already cleared 100 times in its collective mind. Colonel Richard Williams, who commanded 22nd SAS during the period encompassing Operation Barras, reportedly summarized the regiment's philosophy in a single sentence during a briefing to newly badged troopers at Hereford. Preparation is not a phase of the operation. Preparation is the operation. Everything else is just execution. Gaberi Bana is quiet now. The compound is gone, reclaimed by the jungle within years. The Rokul Creek still runs brown and slow through the Ochre Hills. The road between Freetown and Masiaka is open and safe, used daily by traders, commuters, and aid vehicles. There is no memorial at the site, no plaque, nothing to mark what happened there on a September morning when 72 men flew into a compound held by 400 and came out with everyone they went in for. The West Side boys are gone. Fode Calais was convicted by a Sierra Leone court and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Most of his surviving fighters were processed through the disarmament program and returned to civilian life. Some were children who are now adults with families of their own, living in a country that has maintained fragile but genuine peace for over 2 decades. The SAS returned to Hereford. D Squadron rotated back into the regular cycle of deployments, training, and readiness that defines life in the regiment. Within 18 months, many of the same operators would be in Afghanistan, conducting operations in the Tora Bora Mountains that made Sierra Leone look like a training exercise. Brad Tinian's family received the visit that every military family dreads, a knock on the door, 2 uniformed officers, the words that cannot be taken back. He was posthumously mentioned in dispatches. His sacrifice is recorded in the regimental history and in the memory of every man who served alongside him. This is what Operation Barras proved. Not that the SAS is the best special forces unit in the world, though the evidence does rather support that conclusion. Not that the British military can project force into difficult environments, though it demonstrated that beyond any question. What it proved is something simpler and more fundamental. It proved that there is a direct, measurable, quantifiable relationship between the quality of preparation and the speed of execution. 11 days of observation, 97 seconds of action, 264 hours of watching to purchase 71 seconds of certainty. That ratio, preparation to execution, is the signature of elite military operations. It is what separates a rescue from a massacre. It is what separates D Squadron from every unit that attempts what D Squadron does and fails. 09:30 hours, September 10th, 2000. Leone Airport, Sierra Leone. The last Chinook powers down. The rotors slow and stop. The silence is enormous. 72 men who were in combat 90 minutes ago stand on an airstrip in 33-degree heat, weapons cleared, kit dropped, faces blank with the particular exhaustion that follows sustained adrenaline. 6 men who should have been dead by 0730 are alive. 1 man who should have been alive is not. That is the arithmetic of Operation Barras. That is the cost. That is the result. And when the brigadier at Northwood asked who approved this suicide mission, the answer was everyone who believed that those 6 soldiers deserved to come home. The answer was a country that refused to abandon its people. The answer was 72 men who got on helicopters, knowing the casualty estimate, and went anyway. The clock stopped at 09:30. The war stopped within the week. The silence, when it finally came, was the loudest thing any of them had ever heard.